We're gonna wait just a minute to give one of our participants to arrive, so just a couple minutes and we'll get started. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the first meeting of the Human Services Work Group for the City of Lacey, and I'm happy to have everybody here today. We're gonna do a brief introductions to start, and I will do a roll call. I believe we have everyone present here today. So we have Jim Bowman, Nathaniel Clay, Nancy Delay, and am I saying your name right? Dela. Juliet Lawson Hall. Dahlia Martinez, am I saying your name correctly? Great. Brandon Stevens and Tiffany Walker. So we have all members present and we have a quorum. And so we can go ahead and get started. One of the things that the City of Lacey requires is we always do a land acknowledgement at all of our meetings. So I'm gonna read the land acknowledgement. We, the City of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Swaxon Island Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who are absorbed and relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. And with that, I'm going to turn over to, let's do introductions first. So I'm Michelle Chavez. I am the Human Services Coordinator for the City of Lacey, and I have the great honor of working with all of you on this work group. And I've met all of you through the interview process, and I'm really excited that you agreed to participate with us on this endeavor because it's a very exciting time.
I'm Shannon Kelly Fong. I'm the Assistant City Manager.
Nice. My name is Brandon Stevens and I'm a resident of Lacey.
Hi, my name is Dahlia Martinez and I am also a resident of Lacey.
My name is Nathaniel Clay and I'm also a resident of Lacey.
My name is Nancy Dela and I am a 5-month resident of Lacey.
My name is Juliet Lawson Hall. I am originally from the Caribbean and became a resident in 2018 of Lacey.
Good evening, I'm Jim Broman and I'm a 34-year resident of the city. Retired fire chief from the city.
My name is Tiffany Walker. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a resident of the City of Lacey since 2018.
Good evening, Alyssa Fontaine, City Clerk for City of Lacey. Paul White here also helping facilitate the meeting. He's our Deputy City Clerk.
I'm back there.
He raises his hand, stop me, so we
Yeah.
can check in with him.
Okay.
So welcome, everybody. I'm gonna turn it over to Shannon Kelly Fawn, who's gonna do a brief welcome to the work group for everybody.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and Michelle is going to be leading, this group and has done all the heavy lifting. You've met Michelle through the interview process, and so Michelle's going to be a constant here moving forward, and I'll be here for a period of time. I want to start first and foremost by saying thank you all for volunteering to be on this board, for taking time out of your day to be here and to help the city of Lacey make some decisions and recommendations on its human services grant program that we're going to be standing up. I know, we all have a lot of commitments, and so we just really appreciate you being able to carve this out and to participate and be here. I do want to highlight that the work that you all are about to do is a council priority. It was prioritized in our work plan for 2022 to 2024. Specifically, it was work to create a comprehensive plan for city social services, emphasizing a transparent process. And so what you all are here today and through the next couple of months is to help us through establishing what this process is going to be looking like for our human services grant program, to also helping us craft and inform and make a recommendation on a needs assessment so we can help identify where there could be gaps here in the community. And I know Michelle is going to deep dive into all of this. So I'm just giving a brief overview. And then also there could be potential opportunities for this group to also be involved in recommendations for other type of grant funding and policies too. So I think you all are going to have a very full docket of information to go through. And like I said, when I started this off, we're just really excited that you all are here, went through the application process, went through the interview process, and are now here tonight to really help us and here with us for the next couple of months. And, the possibility, the future, we're going to determine what that could look like moving forward together. So thank you all.
Thank you for the opportunity. All right, so we don't have our officers established yet, so I'm just gonna do a brief motion to approve the agenda. So can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So second,
We have a motion from,
Brandon,
so Brandon makes a motion.
I second it.
Tiffany
let's
seconds.
see how it works.
Any discussion or I'll just go do a call of hands. All in favor? Nice. And that is approved.
And so in the future, I know obviously we're starting this off, but please feel free to be verbal in your approval. Say your ayes. It really helps our clerk's office down here, Paul, as he's trying to capture. Raised hands is great too. So if you can go aye and raise your hand and do all of that, that's helpful for us in our processes.
The next agenda item is public comment. Do we have anyone online for comments?
We do not have anybody online.
And we don't have anybody in person for comments,
So
so.
sign in this time.
Yeah. Nancy got called on at the city council meeting because she signed in as a public comment. She's like,
Wait a second.
I am here for a different agenda item. Okay, the next agenda item is advisory board stipend program and city email addresses. And that is Shannon and Alyssa.
All right, well, good evening again, everyone. So tonight we're taking care of a lot of logistical issues as we go through the startup of the meeting. And so I have a quick question on streaming. Alyssa, can you confirm that we're streaming?
Yes.
Correct. All right, perfect. And so what we're gonna go over today is a program that you all have the opportunity to opt into if you want to, and then also some voluntary information that we are looking for you to collect for our advisory boards. And then also to get you set up with city email addresses so that Michelle can start sending you messages to those email addresses rather than your personal email addresses for record retention purposes. So we'll get started here really quickly. Like I mentioned, we'll talk about the stipend program, we'll go over some demographics. Alyssa's gonna take it away and talk about what our program for civic clerk and board portal access is. And then also, we're gonna be here tonight hanging out. So as we're going through this information, don't feel like you have to do this all right now. We'll be able to help you as the meeting wraps up if you have any tech issues with the iPads that are in front of you to use. Right, so the advisory board stipend program So this year, this is the very first year that we are doing this. This is something that our Commission on Equity reviewed as a policy and recommended it to the council, and the council adopted and provided a budget for it in 2024. This program is designed to offset incurred expenses for participating in advisory boards. So you all, like I mentioned, it takes a lot of resources, and time is one of them, but there can also be some monetary resources as well to be here at today's meeting. So for example, if you had to travel here, driving here, taking the bus here, taking other types of transportation, maybe an Uber or a taxi. Parking, not necessarily here at City Hall. Our parking is free as of right now, so there's a big parking space here. But also internet access. So we like to have all of our meetings hybrid, so you can attend here in person. I'm glad to see you all here in person tonight. In the future, if something comes up, it is available for you to also attend remotely, if necessary and you need to. And so, internet expenses, and then also things like childcare expenses, recognizing that we want to hear voices across our community from a lot of perspectives. And sometimes, individuals with younger children have a harder time making these types of meetings because of childcare. So we reviewed this with the Commission on Equity, and they said, hey, these things could be barriers to getting voices and perspectives that we really, really want to hear as we're designing and planning the future of the city, our policies and our programs. So we've crafted this program to offset that. Importantly, through this program, if you opt into it, that doesn't change what you're doing. You're still a volunteer, and it's just a stipend. So when we reviewed this with various advisory boards, the Commission on Equity and the City Council, we wanted to provide them just an example of, again, some of the voices that might be missing and why this could really be impactful for the community. So what you're seeing up here are 3 community members. They have very different lives. You can see our first community member is retired, has no children at home, and owns a vehicle. So we're making some assumptions here. These are just examples, but with this individual, it's presumed that they have a lot of discretionary time. They're not going to require childcare since they have no children at home, and their time to commute to the meeting is pretty short. They've got a vehicle, they can get here in 10 minutes. So if you have a meeting that's 90 minutes, your travel time to and then back home is at 20 minutes collectively, maybe they expend $3 in gas. But their total time is 110 minutes. When we take a look at community member number 1 comparative to community member number 2 and number 3, we can see that changes. So with community member number 2, they're in the workforce from 9 to 5. They do have children under the age of 5. They're a single parent and they're a vehicle owner. Their discretionary time might be much more limited than our community member number 1, and they may require childcare. Their time remains the same, but you can see that with the meeting time and the travel time being the same, they have some increased expenses from not only gas, but having childcare. And so their total cost to participate in this meeting is $53. For community member 3, very similar, they're in the workforce, they have children under 10, but they're a transit user and they have no high-speed internet access. So their discretionary time is also limited. They have to take a bus. The bus ride is typically longer than if somebody had a personal vehicle. So in this case, it's 30 minutes, and they may not be able to access meetings by internet unless there was some way to fund the high-speed internet. And if they're coming in person, then they're going to require childcare. And so you can see the meeting time's the same, their travel time is much higher, their internet or childcare costs could be higher, and so their expenditures to attend the meeting are higher as well. So as part of this program, after taking it again through our advisory boards, our Commission on Equity, and then finally getting it approved by the City Council, it was determined that it was going to apply across our advisory boards, so our Parks, Culture, Recreation, our Civil Service, Commission on Equity, Historical, Law Enforcement Officer and Firefighters, Library Board, Planning Commission, our Youth Council, our Lodging Tax Committee, and then any ad hoc advisory boards. So that would include this group. So you all are going to have the opportunity to participate in this program. So how the program works, just really briefly, is that participants are going to need to opt in on an annual basis. So this is a new group, so we're gonna have you all decide if you want to opt in today. What we are trying to do with the rest of our advisory boards is they'll have the decision in January. So the first 2 months, they'll be able to decide whether or not they want to opt into the program. If you opt into the program on an annual basis, you will be able to receive a $50 stipend per meeting attended. And this includes whether you attend in person or you attend remotely. As long as you attend, you are eligible to receive that $50 stipend. No advisory board member can receive more than $500 annually, and that's on a calendar year, so from January to December. And this threshold is set by the Volunteer Protection Act, which is a federal law, and this is what allows us to keep volunteer status and have liability protection for our volunteers. The stipends themselves, per our policy, will be distributed at a minimum of 4 times per year, and we're trying to work through our process of if we can't do it sooner moving forward, but at least 4 times per year, so quarterly. And then if you do opt into the program, you will have to follow all relevant tax requirements. The program itself does not apply to our regional boards. This is not one of our regional boards. It doesn't apply to council members. We do have council members who participate on some advisory boards. And it doesn't apply to city employees who might be serving on our advisory boards. We're gonna go back to the council annually just to talk about our opt-in, our opt-out rates, and then also to talk about who's serving on our advisory boards. And I'm here as part of the city manager's office implementing this, but also all the heavy lifting is really done by our city clerk's office. So I want to tip my hat to Alyssa over here in our finance department as well.
Right, this is me. Thank you, Shannon. So what to expect next? We've touched on this a little bit, but we have a handout that we will be distributing at the end of the meeting for you all to individually select your choice, whether to opt in or opt out. If you're not ready to make a decision tonight, you can take that handout with you and return it at a later date. And then we will keep that on file. So members who opt in will receive an email from our electronic platform known as PaymentWorks. This is issued through our finance department and it is a trusted communication. Opt-in members that will set up an account through PaymentWorks that it's a secure platform that collects your preferred payment details and then issues those electronic payments. And then they also includes a completed W-9 tax form for finances purposes as well. So something to anticipate if you choose to opt in. As I mentioned, some trusted communications from PaymentWorks that will come through the finance department only for those opting in. And then should opt-in communications come through in January and February at a later date, those can come through electronically through Smartsheet as well. So we have a couple of different platforms that we'll be communicating in advance so that you all know what to expect from the city. And then this actually we're leading into our civic clerk board portal and public meeting platform for our meetings. So transitioning a little bit, was there any questions on stipend program?
You did say that there was gonna be like something towards the end that shows like opt-in rates and stuff like that, or?
Yeah,
Is that
there'll
what
be
you
an
said?
opt-in, opt-out selection for each individual member that will.
Oh,
do
gotcha.
a
I was just
handout for you.
wondering what the why there's such an emphasis on the opt-in as opposed to just like giving a stipend. Is it just simply because it's a volunteer like board?
Yeah, I can answer that question. It's a good
Cause
one.
I see a lot of opt-in wording in there.
Yeah, well, so when we were designing this program, and again, we reviewed it with a lot of advisory boards and our Commission on Equity, there was a lot of voices that said, I want to retain being, not getting anything for my volunteer
Gotcha.
work. And so we wanted to accommodate that so people could make the decision whether they wanted to participate or if they didn't want to participate and just continue on without receiving a stipend.
Just wondering like why that was such a distinction in there. Thank you.
Right, great question. All right, so the city uses Civic Clerk to post, publish, and make available all of our public meeting materials. So the agenda packets, presentation materials, and then after the meetings are held, the recording and audio to refer back to. As members of the Human Services Workgroup, you will all gain board member access to this platform that Michelle and our office will be communicating when agendas get published. They'll get a link to the Civic Clerk platform. And you will be able to access public meeting materials for upcoming meetings, but also refer back to for past meetings as well. This also provides the live meeting progress. So what Paula is actually working on and bookmarking, and so that the public can follow along and also refer back to at a later date. And it also gives us a feature for electronic roll call, which does directly feed into the stipend program process for the clerk's office to collect who is all at the meeting that has chose to opt into the stipend program and is eligible to receive those payments. So meeting login information, this will look familiar once we get you all set up with your city issued email addresses and logged into the portal. You can use the public meeting portal as well, so it's accessible in a lot of different ways. But you would sign into the board portal using the credentials in which we provide. And then you can join the relevant meeting and follow along should you want to follow along here at the meeting or if you are attending remotely as well. So, and you will all be present voting members, so it does provide a choice, but we really only have one in this scenario. Civic Clerk does provide a vote results that is a great tool for the public as well as just members in the meeting. So here's an option or example of what gets displayed on our platform as well as our streaming services when a motion is made, seconded and adopted or it fails, it will give the vote results and gives a very clear and detailed account of that. And then Civic Clerk also provides a leave meeting function. It will time out after 24 hours. If you forget to leave a meeting, you are not still there and present, so no worries. It is just something that can cause some confusion once you're logged into the board portal. Great.
So Melissa's gonna be around too if you have questions about the board portal after the meeting too, just to go over that again. I know it's a lot of information y'all are gonna be taking on today, but we're here to help. And Melissa is always here as a resource if you have any questions, whether it's about the advisory board stipend once you get the email or about the board portal here moving forward and emails as well, which we'll go over.
Yes, and to that point, Shannon, thank you. We do have some future training further down the agenda on public records and open public meetings, but the email addresses that will be issued to you this evening are city issued email addresses. And they are emails relating to the conduct of public business. So they are considered, any communications on those are public records and subject to public review. So city technology resources are to be used for official city business, and as your role as on this work group, they'll stay for that role that you guys all serve. So we'll touch a little bit more on that and what that looks like, but these are being issued for those purposes only.
And it'll be just like mine, it'll be first name dot last name.
Mhm.
Yeah, first name dot last name at cityoflacey.org.
All right, so advisory board member demographic survey. So in addition to our stipend program, one of the things that we wanted to really know is who's serving on our advisory boards right now and what perspectives or voices might we be missing, so that in the future, when we do outreach and engagement, we can do some more targeted outreach and engagement. And so we are asking all of our advisory boards is to provide voluntary demographic information. So we've got a list of questions here on your iPads that we would like you all to fill out to the degree that you want to fill them out. So all of the questions are voluntary. You don't have to fill out everything. You can skip questions if you don't want to answer those questions. What we're doing with these questions, like I mentioned, is we've taken it and we've reported out to the council actually here a couple of months ago on what our advisory boards look like as of present day. And we want to continue to do that moving forward every year or a couple of years so that the council can see, hey, do we represent our community? Are we reflective of our community? Or do we need to think about doing some more targeted outreach in areas moving forward? How we're collecting this information, I just want to make very clear, is the survey that you're filling out right now isn't going to ask you for your name. It is going to ask you for the board that you are serving on, and that's it. And we are keeping this information separate from any information connected to any of your applicant data or data on the advisory boards. So completely separate, but when you're with small sample sizes, you can only aggregate it so much, so just for awareness. But we are trying to keep those separate, and then we will try to compare it and see if we are again reflective of the community moving forward. Any questions on the advisory board survey? Some of the demographic questions, just really quickly that we're gonna ask, and again, all voluntary are, age, racial identity, ethnic identity, languages spoken, disability, annual income, home ownership, gender identity, sexual orientation, highest level of education and veteran status. And all of them are up to you to answer. Any questions? Great. So those surveys are loaded on the iPads in front of you, and we will take them
Is that?
at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
And we'll go over how you access them.
I'm like,
Oh, preloaded.
Yeah, we have everything preloaded on there and the password. Can I say the password to get on?
We'll go over all of it at the end of the
At
meeting.
the end, okay.
Yep.
Right.
So that completes agenda item 7. A. And item 7B is open meeting law and public records, and this is myself and Alyssa. We're gonna go over the public records rules governing this body. And like I said a little bit earlier, we actually have 4 lessons on your agenda, but we actually have to complete 3 tonight. Lesson 4 is optional. If you'd like to do that on your own, you can review that later.
Right, let's begin. So we are starting with lesson 1, which is provided by the Washington State Attorney General's office. So this is their PowerPoint presentation that is linked to the agenda, but it does not have any automation or video associated with it. So we're just gonna walk through it. And then at the end of the meeting, we will go through and check box that all the lessons that we completed, sign it, and you have all completed your OPMA training at the end of this meeting. So that is a requirement that gets fulfilled within 90 days of being appointed onto board. Great. This presentation, here we go. All right, so the Open Government Trainings Act was enacted in 2014, and it requires local and statewide officials and records officers to have mandated training. So as members of advisory board to the city council, you are subject to the OPMA and qualify for this required training. So we go through and they've provided us some quotes here from James Madison, John F. Kennedy, and Washington State Supreme Court. Open government laws are often called transparency laws or sunshine laws. Strong sunshine laws are crucial to assuring government transparency and accountability. Washington State does, our Public Records Act is actually one of the strongest open government laws nationwide. So wanting to build public confidence in our government. So we're gonna highlight 2 different statutes this evening. We have the Open Public Records Act, which is covered under 4256 for the Revised Code of Washington, as well as the Open Public Meetings Act. So PRA, OPMA, lots of acronyms. I will try to not just blend them all together. So the Open Public Records Act intent includes the free and open examination of public records. That it's in an interest or in the public interest, even though such examination may cause inconvenience or embarrassment to public officials or others. There's some other quotes in here, but really the intent is public records are open. Open public meetings, on the other side, intent provides that people remain informed so that they may retain control over the instruments in which they have created. Some parts of open public meetings may be closed to the public, but only if certain requirements are met. And the same thing applies to the Public Records Act. There are some exemptions that would protect truly confidential materials, but they do have to have laws associated with them. All right, so some history. The Open Public Records Act was formally passed in 1972, and it applies to all public agencies, state and local, so covers all of us. It does not apply to the courts. They do have a separate act that they adhere to. However, if a city or state agency does have court records, we follow the PRA. It is limited application to legislature, and public records are defined to include writings. In 1972, that covered, a wide definition, but it's even stronger today. So really anything, recordings, documentations, records, you name it, if we are creating it, maintaining it, retaining it for public business, it is considered a public record. So records are open unless there's an exemption authorized by law, as I mentioned. So we are able to protect social security numbers, for example, and anything that we can point and cite to a law that authorizes that. Open public meetings passed in 1971, so just 1 year prior. And applies to all multi-member public agency boards, commissions, governing bodies, and their committees. It does not apply to the courts and does not apply to the legislature. And it requires meetings of governing bodies to be open to the public, start to finish, unless there is an exemption authorized by law as well. Well, a little bit of a recap. Records of public agencies are presumed open. Again, records or information within the content can be withheld only by law. Meetings of agencies that are subject to the OPMA are presumed open and is to be liberally construed. Meetings or parts of meetings can only be closed by law, so they give us very defined definitions on what could be considered under a closed meeting. As mentioned, the PRA applies to any writing containing information relating to the conduct of government, as well as any performance prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of the physical form or characteristics. So this is where kind of, even though it says writing, it really encompasses everything. We have microfiche listed here, overheads, if you are familiar, as well. So a wide scope. The OPMA applies to multi-member public, state, and local agencies as follows here. I'm not going to read all of that, but where this kind of falls for application here is any sub-agency of a public agency which is created by or pursuant to statute, ordinance, or other legislative act, which includes planning commissions, library or park boards, human services work groups. So withholding records or closing meetings, it's a big no-no, we will not be doing that. Withholding a public record or information in a public record has to be authorized by law, and here at the city, we only have a handful of staff that are authorized to do so. We can only exempt the information that can be withheld. We can't exempt an entire record just because it has something confidential within it. And the agencies must cite the basis, and then we also give a explanation and description of that as well to the requester. Closing a meeting under the Public Meetings Act has to be authorized by law, and we do give ample notice and make sure that we have all of our required noticing to the public on what that is and why and how it is authorized. So that's covered there where we announce the reason for going into an executive session, which would be a closed meeting. Enforcement and penalties under both acts are outlined here. So the PRA is enforced by the courts for any claims that are filed under RCW 4256. They can be quite hefty depending on what is going on within the claims. They can order payment of requesters' attorneys' fees and costs, and statutory penalties can be awarded to the requester as well. So there is strong interest in making sure that we are compliant with all of our public records laws, rules, and regulations. The OPMA is also enforced by the courts and can impose a $500 civil penalty against each member. Courts will award costs and attorney fees to successful parties seeking the remedy as well, and action taken at an improperly closed meeting can be declared null and void. Very serious on both accounts.
Ask a question.
Yes, of course.
What does the law mean by each member? They're under OPMA, this first bullet there,
This one here
penalty against each member.
of the body that participated in the violation
Okay.
is how I would interpret that. So some risk management tips so that we all have some education and know how to proceed. So for Public Records Act agencies, we establish a culture of compliance with the Public Records Act and review our procedures, make resources available, best practices, training. We impose training on a routine basis as required by law, but also more frequently as well. We have legal counsel to consult on when new things arise and we have questions to maintain best practices. And training all of our appropriate staff and elected officials and any of our advisory board members to the PRA requirements and best practices. You all will be creating public records and participating, so it's a good training to have. Same for open public meetings. Obviously, we are to establish a culture of compliance with the OPMA. We consistently review any of the procedures, updates, make resources available and institute best practices, which is why we are all here on the very first meeting of this body and providing information to you all. Okay, so here's a fair amount of recap, but just to kind of highlight some things for the Open Public Records Act. This is an Attorney General's resource and there is a ton of it. So this PowerPoint slide here contains just a fraction of what they make available. So if you were to follow any one of the links that are presented on the agenda, there are a long list of resources available and some tips, FAQs, best practices, should you have any questions. And they have developed model rules and to assist agencies across the state to better proceed. They also, for the Open Public Meetings Act, the Attorney General's office has provided really the same thing. So they've got 2 pages. We've got Public Records Act and we've got the Open Public Meetings Act as well. So they do issue formal opinions when necessary and for qualified requesters and all of that can be found there. That concludes lesson 1. Is there any questions? There was a lot. So, and just to kind of tie it back into the city issued email addresses, there is no right to privacy for use of city technology and with public records in creating and communicating. So just if you were to have any questions or just any interest further in kind of the details, definitely reach out to Michelle or myself and we'd be happy to discuss further.
So Alyssa mentioned the city emails, and I do just also want to recognize, I think, number one, this PowerPoint presentation was made a while ago. I think I saw hard disks on there and CD-ROMs. But texting also is something to be aware of as a public record. And then also, Alyssa, I know we're gonna dive into this in a little bit with Michelle talking about quorum, but can you talk about when something would potentially become a public meeting here in this setting?
So yeah, so anytime there is a quorum of a body, so that is something to be mindful of. We notice here at the city, so if you know, we anticipate a quorum of you all to attend a different city event or public meeting, that is something that we notice and make sure that the public has that transparency, that you all are there, no business is to be conducted, actions taking place, but that also applies to emails as well. So when staff send out an email to you all advising of, you know, agendas being published or coordinating schedules or anything, a reply all can create a serial meeting. And that is something that we definitely want to stay away from because it is not a noticed and it's not being facilitated as a public meeting. So that's, we don't want to create one by accident.
So Michelle will send out information to all of you. Don't reply all, please. Reply directly to Michelle.
Take note.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Will we ever have a meeting if we don't have a quorum?
No, not for the purposes. So if there were any, and Shannon, you might be able to provide some additional information, but if there were some subcommittees created or anything of that nature, it's done through the work of this body and would be facilitated and noticed and planned for in that way. But should we have a regular meeting scheduled and a quorum does not show up, we would have to come on to the streaming devices and announce to the public that we don't have a quorum and the meeting will not be taking place and therefore end the time. And so that is announced and provided to anybody who was looking to attend the meeting.
Thank you.
Lesson number two it is. I think we have a video to show now. So
Yeah.
again, these are Attorney General materials.
No more of
We
me
don't-
talking through their
We
material.
don't take responsibility for the content. This is the Attorney General's materials.
Sounds like you may have done that before.
We get to see him.
Before we share the screen, so one moment, please.
I also had to take all of this when I started.
We all do.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Bob Ferguson, your Attorney General. With me in this video is the Open Government Assistant Attorney General, Nancy Creer. This training video provides a basic overview of our Public Records Act for both records requesters and state and local agencies. It's intended to provide greater understanding of the legal requirements around the act. The Public Records Act is a law created by an initiative vote of the people in 1972, which provides the public access to the records of government agencies. It receives 72% of the vote. The purpose of the act is to provide the public full access to information concerning the conduct of government, mindful of individuals' privacy rights, and fulfill the desire for the efficient administration of government. The law is based on the principle that open government is essential to a free society. All state and local agencies must comply with the Public Records Act. All public records must be disclosed unless a law exempts records or information. There are well over several hundred exemptions. Some of those exemptions are listed in the Act, but many exist in other state and federal laws. The Act is a broad mandate interpreted in favor of disclosure, and its exemptions are narrowly construed.
This training presentation is based on the Public Records Act and the Attorney General's Advisory Model Rules. The rules are online at the Attorney General's website at www.atg.wa.gov. They provide examples of steps to comply with the Public Records Act. An agency may adopt any part of the model rules into its own rules. Local agencies should consult the model rules when establishing local Public Records Act ordinances. The model rules provide comments that are useful for interpreting the Public Records Act and for training agency personnel. The model rules are non-binding, but they are based on extensive outreach, court decisions, and have been cited favorably in some court cases. This training video was prepared in the fall of 2017. The model rules were being updated in 2017. The legislature also amended the Public Records Act in 2017, and the legislature can amend it again in the future. The courts can also interpret the act. Consequently, and as a reminder, there may be developments in the law after this video is prepared. Several updates on the law are often posted in materials on the Attorney General's office website on the Open Government Training page. A PowerPoint on that page also provides training on the Public Records Act. This training video contains 16 short segments where we will review history, purpose, and intent of the Public Records Act, scope of the PRA, general obligations of an agency, what is a public record, requests for records, initial agency responses, reasonable estimates, adequate searches, disclosure, electronic records, managing broad requests, exemptions and withholding, fees, other records provisions, liability, and finally, additional resources. just heard from the Attorney General about the history, purpose, and intent of the Act. The Act regulates the disclosure of public records. The Act requires disclosure of public records unless a law permits withholding of a record or part of a record. The Act has many components, and compliance requires training. Training can be the difference between a satisfied requester and expensive litigation. The Act applies to both state and local agencies. A state agency includes every state office, department, division, bureau, board, and commission. A local agency includes every county, city, town, municipal corporation, special purpose district, and other forms of local government. In some cases, an entity which is not an agency can still be subject to the Act when it is the functional equivalent of an agency. This determination depends on whether it performs a government function, receives government funding, the extent of government involvement or regulation, and whether the entity was created by government. Courts are not subject to the Act. Agencies must appoint a public records officer responsible for being a point of contact for the public and for overseeing compliance. The name and contact information of the public records officer should be published with information on how to submit requests for records. The public records officer must have received training on the Act within 90 days of assuming his or her duties. Agencies must also publish information on the agency organization, rules, and procedures, and an index of specific categories of records. Agencies are required to adopt reasonable rules to provide full public access to public records, to protect public records from damage or disorganization, to prevent excessive interference with other essential functions of the agency, and to provide the fullest assistance to inquirers. Agencies may wish to consult with their attorneys when developing their rules and procedures. A public record is any writing relating to the conduct of government which is prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristics. It could be an email, text message, paper, letter, or memo, an audio or video recording, a picture, image, map, or any recording of information or data compilation from which information may be obtained or translated. A public record is not just what an agency creates, but includes documents created by citizens or private companies that are used or received by a government for a governmental purpose. A public record may also include documents not possessed by the agency, but which were used by the agency. For example, the courts have described that work documents on the personal computer, personal cell phone, or personal email account of an agency employee or official are subject to a request under the Public Records Act. Records of certain volunteers are excluded from the definition of public record. Records are excluded when they are not otherwise required to be retained and are held by volunteers who do not serve in an administrative capacity, have not been appointed by the agency to an agency board, commission, or internship, and do not have a supervisory role or delegated agency authority. Any person wishing to inspect or copy public records of an agency should submit the request to the agency, preferably in writing, using the agency's request form. The Public Records Act doesn't prescribe any official format for a valid request, so an agency must honor valid requests for identifiable records regardless of the format of the request. While using an agency's form is not required, it is typically the most efficient way to submit a request. A requester who chooses not to use an agency form must give the agency fair notice that he or she is submitting a request for public records. Agencies are required to honor requests received in person during an agency's normal office hours or by email. If an agency has adopted reasonable rules on how requests should be submitted, the agency may rely on those rules. The agency should be helpful to the requester in explaining how a request should be submitted and to whom. Records shall be available for inspection and copying upon request for identifiable records. So requesters should give a reasonable description of the records, enabling the agency to search for potentially responsive records. A request for all or substantially all of an agency's records is not a proper request for identifiable records. A request regarding a particular topic or containing a particular keyword or name shall not be considered a request for all of an agency's records. A request for information is not the same as a request for public records. Public Records Act does not apply to requests for information. There is no duty to create a record that does not exist in order to fulfill a request for records or information. However, requests for information are at times easier to fulfill. Fulfilling a request for information may avert a large public records request. An agency must promptly respond to public records requests. Within 5 business days of receiving a request, an agency must respond. An initial response may be any one of the following: acknowledging receipt of the request and providing a reasonable estimate to respond, or fulfilling the request, or providing an internet address and link to the records on the agency's website, or seeking clarification while also, to the greatest extent possible, providing an estimate of time for further response if the request is not clarified, or denying the request with an accompanying written statement of the specific reasons. Reasonably clear requests for identifiable records may require no clarification. However, some requests are unclear. Seeking clarification permits the agency to identify responsive records, which in turn will aid in determining the scope of the request. Clarifying a request provides the fullest assistance to the requester so that the requester receives and pays for only those copies that are desired. Clarification may also result in prompt disclosure by identifying only those records desired. An agency should not seek clarification if the request is for identifiable records and is reasonably clear. If the entire response is unclear and the requester fails to respond to the agency's request for clarification, the agency need not respond to it. However, the agency must respond to those portions of a request that are clear. An agency may deny a bot request, which is a request that was automatically generated by a computer program or script when it is one of multiple requests from the requester received within a 24-hour period. The agency must establish that responding to the bot request would cause excessive interference with other essential agency functions. A requester is typically not required to provide the reason for a request, unless a law necessitates additional information from the requester. Agencies and requesters are encouraged to promptly communicate with each other if there are issues regarding a request. An agency's initial response to a public records request must provide a reasonable estimate for the time to respond when more time is needed. A reasonable estimate should account for many factors, including the time to have the requester clarify the request if needed, as well as time to assemble and review the records, provide notice to affected persons or agencies if needed, to redact exempt information, and to create a withholding or exemption log. An agency should not use the same estimate for every request. Rather, each reasonable estimate should be based on factors such as the complexity of the request, other pending requests, agency resources, and other agency essential functions. It's a good practice for an agency to briefly explain to the requester the basis for the estimate in the initial response. Extending the estimate is appropriate when circumstances have changed or additional information has come to light. Agencies are encouraged to briefly explain the need to revise an estimate. An agency bears the burden of showing that its search was adequate. Consequently, agencies should be able to document how a search was conducted and, for example, what search terms it used, as well as the location searched. An adequate search depends on the facts of each request, but it is one that is reasonably calculated to uncover all responsive documents in whatever form, paper or electronic. An agency must make more than a perfunctory search and follow obvious leads as they are uncovered. The search should not be limited to one or more locations if there are additional places where responsive records are likely to be found. If responsive public records are likely to be found on or in an agency employee's or official's personal device or account, the employee or official must search those devices and accounts for responsive records. It is possible to conduct an adequate search and still not locate a responsive document. However, if a responsive record is not located and/or if challenged in court, the agency will have to prove its search was adequate. An agency must make records available during its customary office hours for a minimum of 30 hours per week. Public records are presumed to be open for inspection and copying unless a specific law exempts the record or information from disclosure. Agencies can deliver copies of records to a requester in a number of ways, such as providing links to the records that are on the agency's website, providing paper copies of paper records or scanned copies of paper records by mail or making them available for pickup, or providing electronic records by various methods. You may recall that with respect to what is a public record, the Public Records Act does not distinguish between paper and electronic records. Most agencies create records in an electronic format. A copy of an electronic record should be produced in the requested electronic format if reasonably feasible. Translating a record into an alternative electronic format at the request of the requester, or scanning a paper record, is not creating a new record. Metadata is information embedded in a document that provides detail about the document's characteristics. This may include information such as when the document was created, edited, recipients, and so forth. Non-exempt metadata must be disclosed when expressly requested. When agencies obtain new technologies, they should consider not only the agency's business operation needs, but also records retention and disclosure requirements. Examples of such technologies are portals through which records can be requested and delivered, electronic redaction tools, or retention software, just to name a few. In addition, agencies can look at whether they could make use of their current technology more robust. The legislature encourages agencies to make public records widely available electronically, particularly commonly requested records. For example, an agency could make commonly requested records available on its website. Then, as noted earlier, an agency could fulfill its obligation to provide access to a public record by providing a requester with a link to a specific agency webpage containing the electronic copy of the requested record. For requesters without access to the internet, an agency could provide a computer terminal at its office. Agencies should develop policies addressing technology concerns, such as if and when agency employees may use personal devices for public agency uses, and what responsibilities and requirements therefore attach to the employee. An agency may receive a broad request that asks for any and all records related to a topic. Agencies may not deny a request solely because it is overly broad. As noted, a request for all or substantially all of an agency's records is not a valid request. But a request for all records regarding a particular topic or containing a particular keyword or name is not a request for all of an agency's records. After an initial search shows there are potentially hundreds or thousands of different types of responsive or potentially responsive records, a public records officer should contact the requester to explain the estimated total number of records that would need to be searched, or provide other information describing the anticipated scope of the search. Then the agency could seek clarification to ask if the requester wants all of the different types of responsive records and is willing to pay for all the copies, or instead, if the requester is seeking only some of the records. Good communication can assist both the agency and the requester. A broad request will usually result in a longer estimate of time for disclosure, as well as producing records in batches or installments. When seeking clarification, to the greatest extent possible, the agency must provide a reasonable estimate of time the agency will require to respond to the request if it is not clarified. In many instances, a requester will narrow the scope of the request to enable the agency to provide disclosure more promptly and less expensively. An agency may manage broad requests in a couple ways. An agency may require a deposit in an amount not to exceed 10% of the estimated cost of providing copies for a request. If an agency makes copies in response to a request available on a partial or installment basis, the agency may charge for each part of the request as it is provided. If an installment of a records request is not claimed or reviewed, the agency is not obligated to fulfill the balance of the request. Finally, use of electronic technologies to search, review, redact, and disclose public records can reduce overall costs of compliance for agencies. Agency responses denying in whole or in part inspection or copy of any public record shall include a statement of the specific exemption authorizing the withholding of the record and a brief explanation of how the exemption applies. Exemptions exist throughout the Public Records Act and other state and federal laws. Common exemptions include information such as personal information in files maintained for agency employees if private, pending investigative files compiled by law enforcement or agencies with authority to discipline members of a profession, the non-disclosure of which is essential to effective law enforcement or for the protection of any person's right to privacy, educational records of students in public schools, attorney-client privilege information or work product related to litigation, or protected healthcare information. There is no statute providing a general privacy exemption. If privacy is an express element of a specific exemption, it is only invaded if disclosure would be both highly offensive to the reasonable person and also not of legitimate concern to the public. Exemptions in the Act must be construed narrowly. The general rule is that an agency redacts or withholds only the exempt information and produces the non-exempt information. An acceptable way of providing this information to the requester is with a withholding index, often called an exemption log. The information provided as part of the log should include a description of the type of record or part of record denied. The description should include identifying information from the document. For example, whether the document is a letter or email, the date the document was created or other relevant date, the total number of pages, and the sender and recipients. The exemption log must also include the statutory authority making the information exempt and a brief explanation of how the exemption applies. Some of this information will be evident on the face of the document where redactions have been made to only part of the document. An exemption log, the written explanation, also may be provided in different formats. For example, maybe handwritten or compiled in a spreadsheet or chart, or in a letter, or redactions are marked on the records with exemption codes, and the requester is given the key to the codes. The format of the exemption log or exemptions is not relevant so long as the required information is provided. Any person may inspect non-exempt public records for free. An agency may not charge for the time of staff to search, review, or redact public records when preparing them for inspection. If a requester wants copies of records, an agency has options to charge for copies. We can charge actual costs, or it can charge default fees listed in the Public Records Act, or it can charge an alternative up to $2 fee for an entire request. Some other provisions may be relevant too. In order to charge actual costs, an agency must make available for public inspection and copying a statement of the actual per page or other costs and how it determined actual costs. An agency may adopt its statement of actual costs only after providing notice and a public hearing. When calculating fees, the agency must use the most reasonable, cost-efficient method available to the agency. Staff time to copy and deliver the requested public records may be included in an agency's costs, but an agency may not include staff salaries, benefits, or other general administrative or overhead charges unless those costs are directly related to the actual cost of copying the public records. An example of when an agency may want to charge for the actual costs of staff time is where an agency scans paper records and copies them into an electronic format. The charges should be reasonable and related to the wage of the person likely to be repeatedly assigned to this task. If an agency does not have staff available to make copies, for non-exempt records, an agency may send a scanning or copying project to an outside vendor and pass on the actual cost to the requester. Electronic copy costs may include the actual cost of the electronic production or file transfer of the record, the use of any cloud-based data storage processing service, and the cost of transmitting electronic records, including the use of a physical media device. A second method to charge copy costs is for an agency to choose to use a statutory default fee schedule provided in the Act. In that case, an agency need not calculate actual costs if it has rules or regulations declaring the reasons doing so would be unduly burdensome. The statutory default fee schedule lists, for example, per page costs for paper records, scanned records, and costs for electronic records. As yet another alternative, an agency can assess an up to $2 flat fee for an entire request when certain conditions are met. The Act includes other fee provisions. For example, an agency cannot charge for access to or downloading of records it routinely posts on its website prior to the receipt of a request, unless the requester has specifically asked that the agency provide records through other means. An agency may impose the actual cost of a customized service charge when the request would require the use of IT expertise to prepare data compilations, or when such customized access services are not used by the agency for other business purposes. The agency must notify the requester and take other steps if it chooses to do a customized service. An agency can require an advance 10% deposit before making copies. An agency may enter into a contract, memorandum of understanding, or other agreement with the requester for an alternative fee arrangement, or in response to an extensive or frequently occurring request. An agency may choose to waive any charge pursuant to agency rules and regulations. Upon request, an agency must provide a summary of the applicable charges before making copies. The requester then may choose to revise the request to reduce the number of copies and the cost. In sum, the Public Records Act provides an agency several options for assessing charges for copies. The choices selected may vary from agency to agency. Under a different law, the records retention laws at RCW 40.14, agencies must maintain a log of public records requests, including for each request, the identity of the requester if provided, date of receipt, text of request, description of records produced, description of records redacted or withheld and the reasons for doing so, and the date of final disposition. With respect to the identity of the requester, it is possible an agency received only an email address from the requester, and if so, that address would be included in the log. The logs must be retained per the agency's records retention schedule and are a public record. The records retention law also provides that agencies spending at least $100,000 to fulfill requests during the prior fiscal year must report 17 data points about their PRA requests to the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee. Under the Public Records Act, any person having been denied an opportunity to inspect or copy a public record may seek further review from the agency. The person may also file a lawsuit to enforce his or her right to access public records. A requester can also file a lawsuit if he or she believes that an agency has not made a reasonable estimate of the time or of the charges to provide public records. Such a lawsuit is to be filed in a court within 1 year of an agency's final definitive response to a request, such as a final claim of exemption or the last production of public records on an installment basis. The agency has the burden of proof to demonstrate that public records were lawfully denied or its estimates were reasonable. If it does not make this showing, an agency will pay the requester's reasonable attorney's fees and costs and may pay potential penalties for denying records in violation of the Public Records Act. A court will consider mitigating and aggravating factors in determining a penalty amount. Lawsuits for public records can be extremely time-consuming and expensive for agencies. Understanding and correctly applying the law is a good risk management tool for state and local government. In rare cases, individual employees may also be civilly or criminally liable under other laws. State agency employees and state officers are subject to the Ethics in Public Service Act. It is a violation of that state ethics law for a state employee or officer to intentionally conceal a public record required to be released under the Public Records Act. State agency employees and officers may be fined up to $5,000 per violation of the state ethics law. It's also a crime for any agency officer to willfully mutilate, destroy, conceal, erase, obliterate, or falsify any record of that agency's office, except where the law expressly authorizes the non-disclosure or destruction of records. The crime is punishable by imprisonment of up to 10 years or a fine of up to $5,000 or both.
Thank you for participating in the Attorney General's Open Government Training. For more information, there are available resources for agencies to receive training and technical assistance for compliance with the Public Records Act. An employee should first consult with its agency's public records officer for routine assistance or training. Additional resources are listed on this website. The Assistant Attorney General for Open Government is also available to provide information about the Public Records Act. Thanks again for watching.
Okay, we made it through that.
One more to go.
Any questions so far?
Yeah, but I'm afraid to ask in public.
Who's our designated official public records officer? There'll be Alyssa, so she's our official expert if we have any questions. Yeah.
I'm here for any questions that you may have. All right, this next
Tonight
one.
or later.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah,
Anytime.
thank you. Next one we have, and it's the last one, that we will be required to complete this evening. So we got 18 minutes left of General's office for one moment.
Hello, I'm Assistant Attorney General Morgan Damaro. This training provides an overview of the Open Public Meetings Act. It's intended for both the public and public agencies. Our purpose in this training is to provide a greater understanding of the legal requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act. The Act was passed in 1971, a time of a nationwide effort to make government affairs more accessible and more responsive. The purpose of the Act is to provide the public access to information concerning the conduct of state and local government. The law is based on the principle that open government is essential to our free society. The Open Public Meetings Act gives the people of Washington State the opportunity to witness the deliberations and decisions of government. More recently, that's included an opportunity to provide public comment as part of that process. Multi-member government bodies, state and local agencies such as school boards, city and county councils, and state commissions must comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The law states that it is intended that the actions of these governing bodies be taken openly and that the deliberations be conducted in an open manner. Meetings subject to the Act must be open to the public, gavel to gavel, unless the law permits a meeting or part of that meeting to be closed. Thank you for watching, and I hope you find this training informative. This training's purpose is to increase your knowledge of the Open Public Meetings Act. The OPMA is in Chapter 4230 of the RCWs, and this training incorporates updates from the 2022 legislative session. This training video contains 15 short segments. We just discussed Section 1, the history, and Section 2, the purpose of the Act. The remaining segments we will review the scope of the OPMA, what is a governing body, what is a meeting, what is action and final action, travel and gathering, regular meetings, special meetings, remote meetings. We'll also talk about executive sessions, public attendance and comment, minutes, liability, as well as other laws and provide some additional resources to assist you. The Act has several clear requirements, and compliance with them is improved with training. Training can mean the difference between meeting your agency's OPMA obligations and expensive litigation. The Act applies to governing bodies of multi-member public agencies, both state and local. At the state level, Public agency includes state boards, commissions, committees, departments, educational institutions, or other state agencies which is created by or pursuant to statute. Public agency does not include the courts or the legislature. For local governments, public agency includes any county, city, school district, special purpose district, or other municipal corporation or political subdivision of the state of Washington. Examples of these include city councils, county councils, school boards, and fire districts. Public agency may also include a sub-agency of a public agency, which is created by or pursuant to statute, ordinance, or other legislative act. A good example of these includes planning commissions, library or park boards, or commissions. A final group is any policy group whose membership includes representatives of publicly owned utilities formed or pursuant to Washington laws when meeting together or as or on behalf of public entities contracted for the output of generating plants being planned and built by an agency operating them. In some cases, an entity which is not an agency may still be subject to the OPMA when it is the functional equivalent of a public agency. This determination depends on whether it performs a governmental function, receives governmental funding, the extent of governmental involvement or regulation, and whether the entity was created by government. Some activities of public agencies are not subject to the OPMA. They include certain licensing and permitting activities, quasi-judicial matters, matters governed by the Washington State Administrative Procedure Act, and certain collective bargaining activities. All meetings of the governing body of a public agency shall be open, and the public and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the governing body of the public agency, except as otherwise provided in the OPMA, such as during a declared emergency. A governing body is defined as a multi-member board, commission, committee, council, or other policy or rulemaking body of a public agency, or any committee thereof, when the committee acts on behalf of the governing body, conducts hearings, takes testimony, or public comment. Agencies governed by an individual, such as a single director, are not subject to the OPMA. Meeting means meetings at which action is taken. Physical presence of the members is not required. A meeting can occur by phone or in some cases by email. I'll talk more about email exchange later in this training. A meeting does not need to be titled meeting. The OPMA also applies to retreats, workshops, and study sessions. In order for there to be a meeting, there must be a quorum of the governing body. A meeting does not occur if there is no quorum. We talked about the fact that the OPMA applies to a governing body at a meeting. In order to qualify as a meeting, the governing body must take action. Action means the transaction of the official business of a public agency by a governing body, including but not limited to receipt of public testimony, deliberations, discussions, considerations, reviews, evaluations, and final action. A subset of action is final action. Final action means a collective positive or negative decision or any actual vote by a majority of the members of a governing body when sitting as a body or an entity upon a motion, proposal, resolution, order, or ordinance. Final actions must occur in public. Secret ballots are not allowed. A majority of the members of a governing body may travel together or gather for purposes other than regular meetings or special meetings, so long as no action is taken. And remember, action includes discussion of agency business. This means a quorum of members can travel to a meeting together, or they can gather at a public or private event, such as a festival or social function, so long as they do not collectively discuss agency business or matters. In the next segments, we are going to talk about types of meetings where a governing body may meet. The first is regular meetings. Regular meetings are recurring meetings held in accordance with a periodic schedule by ordinance, resolution, bylaws, or other rule. State agencies file these notices of regular meetings each year with the Office of the Code Reviser. Regular meeting agendas are to be posted online on the agency's website 24 hours in advance. A special purpose district or city or town is not required to post an agenda online if the agency has an aggregate valuation of property in the taxation district of less than 400 million, a population of less than 3,000, and provides confirmation to the state auditor when filing its annual report that the cost of posting notices to a website would exceed 1/10 of 1% of the agency's budgets. These provisions exempting very small agencies changed in 2022. Certain notice requirements are required for special meetings. These include written notice 24 hours in advance of the meeting, provided to members of the governing body unless waived. The notice must be provided to local newspapers, radio, and TV stations that have a request on file with the agency. The notice must also be posted on the agency's website if it has a website. There is an exception for very small agencies, agencies with no FTEs, or with no one whose job responsibilities, either by job description or by contract, with the responsibility to maintain or update the agency's website. The notice must be prominently displayed at the main entrance site and the meeting site unless the meeting is being held as a remote meeting or one where some or all members of the public are limited due to a declared emergency. The remote meeting provisions are new, so we'll be addressing those in just a moment. The notice must specify the time, place, and business to be transacted. Unlike regular meetings where the agenda may be changed and final action taken on a matter which was added to the agenda, under special meetings provisions, the governing body is prohibited from taking final action on any issue not on the original notice. There is an exception to the notice requirement for emergency special meetings. Those are meetings involving injury or damage to persons or property, or the likelihood of injury or damage, where time requirements make notice impractical and increase the likelihood of injury or damage. New in the OPMA through the 2022 amendments are provisions addressing a governing body holding remote meetings. After the declaration of emergency by a local or state government or agency or by the federal government, and the agency determines that it cannot hold a meeting of the governing body with members of the public in attendance with reasonable safety, the agency may either hold an all remote meeting without a physical location or hold a meeting with the governing body present, but some or all of the public excluded. In either of these instances, the agency must provide an option for the public to listen telephonically or by using a readily available alternate means in real time, such as an available television, cable broadcast, or the internet. Any option selected may not require any additional costs to access the program. If the agency does not provide an option, the agency is prohibited from taking action except for an executive session as authorized under the OPMA. If your agency is holding an all remote meeting with some or all of the public excluded, the notice of the meeting must include instructions on how the public may listen live to the meeting. An agency that held some of its regular meetings remotely prior to March 1st of 2020 may continue to do so with no declared emergency, so long as the agency provides an option for the public to listen as required for emergency remote meetings. Up to now, we've been talking about all the requirements to ensure openness and transparency. Under the OPMA, there are enumerated instances where the governing body may convene outside of the public's view in executive session, or if the governing body is discussing matters not subject to the OPMA. An executive session may occur as part of a regular or special meeting. The grounds for holding an executive session are limited to the purposes listed in the OPMA and are narrowly construed. The purpose of the executive session and the time it will end must be publicly announced before excluding the public, and the time can be extended by further announcement. Examples of purposes include certain real estate transaction discussions, reviewing negotiations on publicly bid contracts, evaluating the qualifications of an applicant for public employment, and meeting with legal counsel regarding enforcement actions, litigation, or potential litigation. The OPMA provides a list of authorized executive session purposes at RCW 4230-110. An agency must carefully follow the law when meeting in an executive session. For example, when meeting in an executive session under the OPMA to discuss agency enforcement actions, litigation, or potential litigation, there are 3 requirements. First, legal counsel representing the agency must be present. Second, the purpose is to discuss an agency enforcement action, litigation, or potential litigation to which the agency, governing body, or a member acting in official capacity is a party or is likely to become a party. And finally, public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. Remember, an agency can discuss only those matters in an executive session under the OPMA that it has told the public it would discuss. The members cannot talk about other topics in that executive session. In addition to an executive session, a public agency can have a closed meeting to discuss matters not subject to the OPMA, such as deliberating on a quasi-judicial matter, or collective bargaining. Other laws may provide additional procedures or authority for particular meetings or hearings to be closed to the public. There may be additional laws for particular agencies as well. As we discussed, all meetings of the governing body of a public agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the governing body of a public agency, except as otherwise provided in the OPMA. An agency also cannot place conditions on attendance, such as require persons to register their names or fill out a questionnaire before attending. This provision does not prohibit any generally applicable condition determined by the governing body to be reasonably necessary to protect public health or safety, or to protect against the interruption of the meeting, including a meeting at which the physical attendance by some or all members of the public is limited due to a declared emergency. As noted, email or phone call discussions amongst members of the governing body can be a meeting under the OPMA. But the purpose of the OPMA is to permit the public to attend and observe agency meetings. So when the public is unable to attend email or phone call discussions that are meetings under the OPMA, the act has been violated. Recent amendments to the OPMA make it clear members of the governing body can participate in meetings remotely with no declared emergency. However, public attendance must be maintained. In doing so, it is generally agreed that public notice procedures must be satisfied, and the agency has to set up a process for the public to attend, such as a speakerphone available at the agency's official meeting location, so the public can hear the discussion. In contrast, since an email exchange amongst a quorum of the members of a governing body is not open to the public, such an exchange in which an action is taken is a meeting that would violate the OPMA. And remember, action is broadly defined. It is very difficult to envision a way in which those email exchanges comply with public notice or attendance requirements for a regular or special meeting. One of the 2022 changes to the OPMA is a requirement that public agencies receive public comment at or before every regular meeting at which final action is taken. The 2022 amendments allow agencies to accept public comment either by written format or oral. If the governing body chooses written public comment, it can be submitted before or at the meeting. Any written comment received must be distributed to the governing body. The governing body may set reasonable deadline for submission prior to the meeting. The oral comment option is very similar to what many agencies were doing voluntarily before the 2022 amendments. Agencies can put reasonable procedures in place to allow for public comment. This may include limits to the time available for public comment or limit comment to those topics on the agenda. However, a governing body may also choose to accept public comment on any topic. If oral public comment is taken by the governing body, it shall, when feasible, provide an option for remote public comment for individuals that have difficulty attending. Difficulty attending may be due to a disability, limited mobility, or for any other reason that makes physical attendance difficult. The governing body is not required to accept public comment that renders orderly conduct of the meeting unfeasible. The OPMA has procedures for dealing with disruptions where orderly conduct of the meeting is unfeasible. The minutes of all regular and special meetings, except executive sessions of such boards, commissions, agencies, or authorities, shall be promptly recorded, and such records shall be open for public inspection. The OPMA does not require an audio or video recording of a meeting. Many agencies choose to do so. Public agencies are encouraged through the 2022 amendments to make audio or video recordings of meetings, or to provide an online streaming option of all regular meetings of the governing body, and to make any recordings that the agency does make available online for a minimum of 6 months. Violations of the OPMA can result in a lawsuit against an agency and its members. A court can impose a $500 civil penalty as personal liability against each member who knowingly violates the OPMA, and a $1,000 penalty for a subsequent knowing violation. A court can also declare any action taken at a meeting not held in compliance with the OPMA null and void. And a court will award costs and attorney's fees to a successful party seeking a remedy under the OPMA. To recap, this presentation covers the highlights of the OPMA. Public agencies may be subject to other laws governing other particular meetings, hearings, procedures. Some agencies have particular laws that cover their meetings as well. Like the OPMA, the laws concerning agency meetings and hearings can also be amended from time to time. Therefore, agencies are cautioned to be mindful for all current laws concerning their meeting and hearing procedures. Thank you for watching the Attorney General's OPMA training. For more information, there are available resources for agencies to receive training and technical assistance for compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. An official should first consult with its agency's counsel for routine assistance and training. Additional resources are listed on this website. The Assistant Attorney General for Open Government is also available to provide information about the Open Public Meetings Act.
All right.
Can we watch
We
it
made it
again?
through.
On your own time.
There's a question.
Question on minutes. Am I correct that those are only the minutes that have been approved by the body? Or is draft minutes are not subject to open public records, correct?
Draft minutes are subject to public records, but so draft minutes would be provided to the body to approve as part of the packet materials. And then once approved, they're finalized and uploaded as that approved official record of the meeting. So while we do maintain the draft because you all have to review to approve it, those are subject to public review in a lot of different ways, but
Okay, thank you.
Brandon, did you have a question? Any other questions about that second section? So we'll have you guys sign off on your OPMA training certificate at the end of the meeting.
that's some homework for you all.
At least there's no tests. so-
There's no. Let me know.
Well, thank you all, and
Thanks.
I will be here for after the meeting for any other questions and said homework.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last piece of the agenda, or second to the last piece. We have two more items on the agenda today. I'm gonna go over kind of the work group over big picture, of the work group, and then there's a boards and commissions handbook in your package. Did y'all have a chance to review that?
A little bit.
And then I'm just gonna kind of go over some highlights about that and also the draft work group rules of procedure. That nothing, we're not voting on anything today. This is just training, orientation. We will be voting in the next meeting for our officers, who will be presiding officers, so a chair and a vice chair. And then we can approve things like the minutes and the rules of procedures and things like that. Now, we do have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday. Is everybody okay with that, attending that one?
Yes.
Next Thursday. So we're gonna be working on that agenda real quick here. We already have a draft, but it hasn't been published yet. We'll be publishing that probably early next week, I think, for the 20th. So, yes,
So sorry, what time is our meeting gonna be next?
5:30.
Okay, I can make that one.
So,
I got the Thurston.
and there won't be any public records training at that meeting. But we thought it was important to get you all started on a good foot. Maybe sharing the wrong slide deck. Show somebody. So this is our overview of the Human Services Work Group and then our rules of procedure. So these are kind of the agenda topics for today. City of Lacey overview, how you all should have in front of you an org chart. It's kind of small on the actual slide, so, but I did put an org chart in front of you in your packet. We'll also go over the Human Services Resolution 1145 that established this work group, so you'll learn about how we determined how this work group was gonna be formed. And then again, you have your boards and commission handbook in your packet as well as your draft work group rules of procedure. So this is the City of Lacey government structure. It's better to look at the handout than on screen because it's really small and hard to see, but obviously the top of the government is the community. So we all report to the taxpayers in the community and we're accountable to them. Then we have the city council, And we have Mayor Ryder, Deputy Mayor Malcolm Miller, and then the other council members. And then the boards and commissions are kind of a separate offshoot, so they're advisory to the council. Council has final authority, so part of your task is to actually help us make recommendations. But if the council does want to make changes to our recommendations, they do have the authority to do that. And then just city manager Rick Walk, I'm located in the city manager's office, as well as Shannon is the assistant city manager. And you can see we have a city attorney, and then we have a lot of different divisions under city manager, like city clerk, public affairs, social services. We have several other departments at the city, community development, community and economic development, finance, HR, parks, police, and public works. So that's the general structure of the city of Lacey. I just thought it was nice to show you where do you fit in? Where does your work plan fit in with that? So just some of you, I'm sure you probably know this, but the city was incorporated in 1966. They have a council mayor system of governance. Currently have 9 boards who advise the council and 2 regional advisory boards. Shannon talked a little bit more about that. That's, I think we have council members who represent us in a regional function, right?
And just a quick correction, council manager, not council mayor form of government. It's correct up on the screen.
Yeah, council manager, sorry. So again, you have the resolution 1145 in the packet, and that is the resolution that passed through the city council and established this work group. And established how many members were going to be involved. Exhibit A is actually where it gives all the details, how there would be an advisory stipend available to all the members. How we would select our own chairperson, what the removal rules are, and as well as what a quorum. Any questions about those items? About kind of an overview of the city government, about resolution 1145? Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna move on to the boards and commission handbook. So I'm not gonna go over the whole handbook. It is lengthy and a lot of it is just kind of, it outlines all the different boards and commissions. And I highlighted some areas of the boards and commissions handbook that I thought were important to pull out, and that is particularly page 11, section 1.02. These are kind of, now how many of you have served on a board or committee before? Some of you are currently actively serving, right? So you already kind of have this, but if you've never been on a formal board or commission, these are some of the best practices for being successful. Maintain excellent relationships, be professional, be responsive, try not to criticize in public. So if there's an issue, maybe address in private. I always appreciate knowing ahead of time, if you have a question about an agenda item or something of concern, give me a call in advance, shoot me an email, and I will definitely get back to you within 24 hours. That's my standard of professional protocol. Listen and be respectful, avoid interrupting and address the chair. So obviously in a kind of, we're not gonna be super formal, we're not the council, but we do wanna respect each other. And so rather than address somebody who you're disagreeing with, you address through the chair. Be mindful of conflict of interest. So that's if I'm on a board or I have an active interest financially in something that's coming before the advisory work group, I would let you all know ahead of time as a member, and I'd say, I have a conflict of interest. I'm gonna be recusing myself from this item. I won't be partaking in discussion and I won't be voting on this item. And we want people to be involved that are involved in other boards and committees in the community. We want people to be involved to have an active engagement, and we don't want to prohibit people who are serving in multiple capacities, but just sometimes there can be agencies we work with that are also applying for grants. Obviously, arrive on time, be prepared. Those are best practices as well. Another part of this I thought was just really important is to avoid texting, emailing, making and receiving phone calls, strive for consensus. I always try to put my phone on silent, when I get to the meeting, just so I don't interrupt in case somebody's presenting. Participate with dignity and decorum, ask questions, and Shannon brought this up earlier, is to vote yes or no on motions rather than just, nodding your head or just raise your hand, say aye or nay, because that helps the clerks with recording the minutes and taking note of actions. And again, if there's a conflict of interest, you can recuse yourself from voting. Respecting open meeting law, again, don't do reply all. We don't have accidental, quorums. We don't want that. So in your rules of procedure too, there's this, we cannot remove a member if they are neglectful of duty or they violate the policies and procedures that are in the handbook. Or if we have more than 3 meetings. If you have a conflict and you can't attend, obviously we want you to attend as many meetings as you can, but life happens and we understand that. Just let me know as soon as you know that I can make sure we have a quorum, because if we have multiple people out, it could be that we would not have a quorum for that meeting. And I'll usually give the chair a heads up and say, we have 2 members out, so just want to let you know, we will have a quorum, or if we don't. And it states in the rules of procedure that we're not going to remove someone for disagreeing. That's part of the conversation there. It's just if it falls in line with what's in the handbook. So again, regarding the last section of that, we have the draft work group. This is kind of modeled after the Commission on Equity. That was one of our most recently formed new commissions. And so I kind of took theirs as a template. And so it looks like this, and it has a header and it says adopted and amended at the top of the paper. We're not going to adopt or amend today. We're just going to talk about it. And then we will hopefully be able to approve something next Thursday night. So again, we talked about this already. Just notify the group publicly as early as possible. Remove yourself from the discussion and voting on that particular item. Robert's Rules of Order. I actually provided you a handout, a 1-page handout on kind of the general. It's a cheat sheet. Yep, it looks like this, and it talks about, this is just the general, most of you have board experience, but so you clearly make a motion, I move that, someone has to second it, and then discussion can occur. And the chair will kind of look around and make sure that people are being able to speak and that they're having a chance to talk and that everyone gets a chance to give their feedback on an item. And then once that, they'll say, are you ready to make a motion? The chair closes the discussion, asks for a vote, and then typically the motion is repeated word for word just to make sure that it's clear again for the clerk's record as well. And then all in favor of the motion, say A or yes or no. And then we'll record the votes. And I'm new to the civic clerk process, but I believe civic clerk has a way to record votes as well, right?
Yeah, it's done manually by the clerk though.
Oh, it's done manually.
Yes.
So you'll hear this word parliamentary procedure. That's something that's basically how we're doing this Robert's Rules of Order. Again, we talked about absences, excused absences, election of officers. So we'd like to elect our officers next week, if possible. And public comment, we have new public comment procedures, which Shannon, you said are going to be amended.
Yeah, so the council is going to consider some new public comment at their next council meeting, which is going to be on June 18th, and pending council's direction, we might be filling in some additional information into this section. In addition to that, council is also going to be taking a look at the advisory board handbook that Michelle just went over, and a lot of it, the updates that could potentially occur are related to public comment, but just for awareness, if action does occur at the council level, we'll make sure to send you out a new copy of the handbook.
So we are looking at public comments for people to sign in when they come in, and then online, we're asking them to sign up 2 hours in advance and limiting the comments to 3 minutes. The time of the meeting, we're hoping to have all of our meetings the first Thursday of the month, except for special exceptions. So to get started in June, we're having 2 meetings back to back, 2 weeks following each other, but typically we're going to try to strive for the first Thursday of the month and aim to end before 8:30, which is in the protocol that's in this Commission on Equity Rules of Procedure as well. Does anyone have any questions about the handbook or the rules of procedure draft? You can also take a look at this rules of procedure over the next week and let me know if there's anything in there that you want to, have concerns about. Or you think we should look at.
These are the standard, this is specific for this group.
This is specific for this group, but it's modeled after kind of standards that other advisory groups have across the city. So we took kind of what the Commission on Equities model was and kind of adapted that to fit this work group. Okay. So that concludes item C. Item 7C. And then item 7D is the draft meeting calendar. And that was also in your package at the very end. And I wanted to let you know that we have decided to add a July 11th meeting. Because I had again, a very packed agenda next week. In order to give, our assistant city manager the time to review the materials and make sure that we have everything, we think it's important to have a meeting. The first Thursday would have fallen on the 4th of July, so that's why it's July 11th. So you should have a revised meeting schedule in front of you. And all of the meetings, they're highlighted in yellow, and those are the meetings that you would be, and the rest of it's more kind of what's happening. You're not required to attend, but it's letting you know what's happening with the schedule.
It's ambitious.
It is ambitious. And again, I have subject to change highlighted at the top. Whenever I will send out some kind of notification to the community too, I'll say there's a subject to change because life happens, unforeseen things occur. And we don't want to give, false expectations that this is set in concrete. This is not going to change. So any other questions regarding the meeting today, the packet, agenda items? Want more training on public record?
We do the fourth one, the fourth again?
Send it to email.
Okay, well, that concludes our agenda this evening. And again, Alyssa's gonna stay here to help folks get their email set up and get your documentation signed. So could I get a motion to adjourn?
So-
Second the motion.
Okay, so
I get it.
makes a motion to adjourn and Juliet seconds.
You're too eager.
Marie, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Did you guys still want to